Hey, welcome to the Meeple Syrup Show, everyone. It is episode 123. That's right, 123. And
Oh,
we are
that's awesome.
officially, Jesse and I figured it out. It's season 5. And the reason why we know that is we started season 1 when Jesse started his PhD, and now he's done his PhD, so it must be season 5. I think that's right. Anyways, even if it's not, we're going to call it season 5, and we're just going to run with it. So tonight we're going to do a little bit of a strange show because we don't have any guests yet again. We're going guestless. Um, and we're going to just talk with each other because we are going to use this time to really discuss our opinions and our ideas about what we're going to do with the show now that we've kind of made some steps towards changing the format a little bit. So we're going to go over our thoughts on that, and we're going to, if anybody's watching out there, I know Niles is watching right now, and if anybody else is watching, you guys can fill us in on what your thoughts are about how our changes are going to be. um, so my name is Sen. And I've been here, I guess, since the beginning. And actually, oddly enough, so is Jesse in some weird way. Jesse, as we learned last week, was on the very first technical run of the show before anybody got to see it. He was the one helping us out to figure out if Google Hangouts worked or not. So my name is Sen. I'm a designer. I design games such as Belfort, but wait, there's more. Akrotiri. I designed, co-designed the Korra game with Jesse. The rules went up today on Kickstarter, so
Yep.
that's cool. And lots of other stuff with my good friend Jay Cormier and Josh Capel. We did Rock Paper Wizards, all sorts of stuff. And together with Jesse and our other friend Scott Bean Fleet, we do a lot of game development. And one of the last ones we did, or well, actually, the last one that got published and the first one we ever did, we've done a couple more since then, is this bad boy right here. This is Who Should We Eat? Oh, this is upside down. This is Who Should We
That's
Eat?
upside down.
And it is a really cool game for a lot of people, for 4 to 10 players. So I'm going to bring it to base camp this weekend and hopefully get a chance to play it. Erica, you're going to base camp, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
Yeah. Jesse, are you going to base camp?
It's a little far from California.
There are people from
Jesse's like
California
he's
here
I
coming to
know.
base camp.
Yeah.
So it happened to just be a little too close to the cross country tour. If base camp happens next year, I will be there.
I know.
No, admit it. You just don't want to be in -21 weather.
I'm also
Like a normal
kind of happy
person.
about that. I mean,
Yeah, right?
the East Coast has been getting slammed.
Yeah, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. So I introduced myself. Erica, why don't you introduce yourself?
So yes, hello, I'm Erica. I'm nowhere near as prolific as Sen.
Oh,
Yet.
whatever.
But
You're getting there really fast. Holy cow, it's awesome.
well, it's good. Actually, it's going to be a big year for me because officially my first games are coming out. So I've got Ink Monsters and from Albino Dragon and Roar with Daryl from IDW, and so those are both coming out in the new year,
Yeah,
like
that's
the
awesome.
beginning of this year.
And you signed a whole bunch of other stuff.
And some of which is mentioned and some of which I can't mention yet, but I'm excited to at some point.
And we'll do it here at some point, which is great.
Well, that's it. As soon as I can say something like live about anything, you guys will know first.
Awesome. And what do you do for your day job?
I'm a teacher. I'm an elementary school teacher. So actually it's fun. All three of us teach at different interesting levels. So you'll get lots of that guy kind of thrown in there every once in a while. But yeah, no, I love my job. I love getting to be creative on so many different levels between teaching and game design that it's just awesome outlets in every direction.
That's right. And just so you know, I did hand in that Breakout Con panel request.
Oh, and games and education?
Yeah. Ooh. So it's going to be a good one.
Live stream it. I want to see it.
We could. I mean, because
we could try. I mean, if nothing else, we'll get it recorded. So
awesome.
But yeah, cool. And that brings us to Jesse. Jesse, who the heck are you?
Me, I'm Jesse. So like Erica, this year will be the year in which you can finally go into a store and buy games with my name on the box. I've got Legend of Korra, which is well on track to fulfilling in February, as was promised. Also have Blade Runner 2049 Nexus Protocol, which should hit stores in January, last I heard. I don't really know.
But, like this month?
Yeah, I think that last I heard it was this month, but I don't know. Things keep getting hung up in weird ways with that one. And And yeah, so I'm a game designer. I do a lot of work with Sen, and then a little bit of work on my own. I've been doing it for a few years, but only seriously for a couple. And then my day job is I am a postdoc, I guess now. Still not quite used to that change in title. I'm a postdoc at Stanford University, and I actually study how neuroscientists interpret data. So I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm a philosopher, but I hang out with neuroscientists all day. So
it's such a funny thing, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, I love that we officially can count in units of Jessey years now, like it's a thing.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I have to say hi to the people who are watching. Niles, I see out there. Niles and I are co-designing a game, Troll and Roll, which will hopefully be out sometime.
Adorable.
Well, yeah, it's really cool. He came up with this really cool idea, and then I sort of tagged along for the ride. And just because it was through a company that, or is going to hopefully, almost, we're almost there, that I have a really good relationship with, and they wanted me to help Niles bring it to this final culmination. So that's what we're doing. And then Sir Bob's out there as well, so that's great. We're gonna have a couple guests, not live with us, but on the chat. So they're live in that feed, and hopefully they can give us some feedback about these ideas we have. So, oh, speaking of New Year's, did anybody make any game-related resolutions? Jess, Erica, did you guys?
I did.
Oh yeah, what was it?
I don't know. I'm kind of shy in some ways, and it's like I'll always put everybody else first, kind of in my own way to kind of be like, it's okay, you don't have to look at me. So I was like, I need to kind of get more of my stuff out there and not always allowing everybody else to turn first, kind of thing. So I don't know. It's also hard because you don't want it. You're still trying to get over the fear of rejection and things like that, and that's a really hard one. And I guess we can talk a bit more about that, especially when we get into our creativity talk, is how much you are being, it's scary being judged on something you're creating and what that can kind of do to you. So it's kind of stealing yourself, and it's like, constantly being more and more ready to hear when anyone has to say, you know what I mean?
Right. So you're going to be unkinder, ungentler Erica.
Not exactly unkinder, ungentler. It's just more putting myself forward, but it's kind of putting myself in a position that it's going to hurt in its own way. If that makes any sense.
How about setting yourself up for success?
Sure, we'll call it that.
Okay. Did you make any, Jess?
Board game related resolutions or design related?
Oh, so,
either. Well, Helena and I have decided to do the 10 by 10 challenge this year.
Oh, cool.
So 10 games, 10 times. Although what we're doing is we're not picking all of our 10 games now. We're picking, yeah, here's our little thing. We got this from the One Board Family blog. It's this nice little thing. Helena mounted it on board. We're going to pick 4 games from our current collection to add to our 10 by 10, and then we're going to allow the other 6 to be filled out over the course of the year, which gives us space to acquire new games and incorporate them into our thing. So,
well, now that you have new space to put new games, I think that's
right. Yeah, like we bought these. We have all these empty shelving space
just waiting to be filled,
and it's like, what are we going to put there besides board games? I'm being told I'm not filling them with board games, but we know.
Can you fill them with video games?
No, because on January 26th, 25th, Monster Hunter World releases, and at that point, there will be no other video games in our household.
There is only one.
There's only one.
There can only be one. Everything else gets its head cut off and worn as a hat.
Right.
No, you just absorb their energy. Come on.
Yeah. So my son will be right there with you, of course, playing Monster Hunter. Perfect. So, I guess I don't actually have one. I didn't make one. I usually make a whole bunch of resolutions, and this year I really didn't for some reason. For me, 2017 was a little bit of a dumpster fire, so I just wanted to say goodbye.
For a lot of people.
Just goodbye to 2017 was like, I think the only good thing that happened was my nephews were born. That was great. Jay had his twins, adorable. And Jay and Danny had their twins, so that was wonderful. But other than that, everything else, not so great. Jessey moved away. That was kind of sucky, that kind of stuff. But maybe I'll think about it. I'll think about it over the course of this show and ask me at the end whether or not I have a resolution for the year. So this year, definitely a resolution for us as a show was to do something a little bit different. In the past, we've only really had like 3 blocks of stuff we do, and really all those blocks are, well, 2 of those 3 blocks are like 5 seconds at the beginning and 5 seconds at the end, and then this giant middle block of the interview. And we sort of wanted to change it up, and there's some rationale for that. Um, I think, Jessey, you kind of expressed it best when you said, well, if I don't like the topic, then I might not watch live. And then you said, but if there were little segments, what would you do, Jess?
Well, this was Erica, to properly, attribute credit. This was Erica's reasoning.
Oh.
I just said no. That matches with with my justifications for not tuning in live when I don't tune in, which is that if there were little segments on the show, was Erica's idea, then you might tune in just to find out if they're going to do, the board game bash where Jessey rails on a published game for 10 minutes or whatever it is, right? We have cute little things, and then people might tune in to check into those specific little bits of content. And then we can, bamboozle our guests into participating in things they didn't expect to participate in and make them wear chicken hats.
Right. And so I think, Erica, your idea was to say, kind of, Fallonize the show, right? In a way, like where
well, sort of, yeah, you make it manageable, but also because then people get it, you're going to have your favorite pieces that you're looking forward to, and that might not be every show, but they'll keep coming up, or you might even like have audience members contribute more and more ideas when they get excited about a segment, so it'll start to build itself up too.
Yeah.
Is the hope,
so
yeah.
our 3 segments kind of literally were like, what have you played lately? The interview, which took up 55 minutes of the hour, and then quick, what's, oops, I didn't mean to give you the finger, quick, what's the what's your one piece of advice that you give to everybody, blah 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 blah, right? And we'd also have to shove that in at the end. So I think if we do this right, we're gonna get a lot more little segments in that the guests can participate in. Whether or not we let them know what's happening before they come, I don't know, maybe. What are your thoughts on that? Should we let people know what segments are before?
I think
the
so.
Guests, at least.
It'll be, as somebody who sometimes on the spot can come up with really good things to say, and sometimes on the spot just completely blanks. I would appreciate in advance knowing when someone, what we're going to talk about, just so I could generate a few quick things, or even know to have, something in front of me to write things down as I'm thinking, just so in case I do get into those moments of like during the headlights, like you feel like you can contribute better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of our very first guests, Brett Myers, one of our friends, had the same feedback, because he just said, I wish you would have told me the questions before. And Daryl and I are like, well, we don't even know what the questions are before. But even if we don't know the questions, at least if people know what segments are going to be on, and we tell them what the segments are about, maybe they'll have a little more of an idea of what they're going into. Or it's like, hey, in this segment, you pick a game and you talk about it, but from this particular angle, right? Mm-hmm. So, on that note, do we want to talk about the segments? Or I see on our list here, we're also following notes.
I think the goal would be to try some stuff, and then we could even either see how we feel doing them or what kind of feedback we get. Yeah. Because at some point it'd be cool to get people to start to suggest segments too. Like we get the ball rolling, and hope, because a lot of them are about generating ideas too, that it'd be interesting to see what keeps coming out of them.
Right. And that leads us into our the next thing that we've had on our agenda, which is creativity in general. And where does creativity come from? Yeah. For me, for you, for Jessey.
Yeah, I think that the hope was to kind of bring the show back around to design again too, and really talk about all those things that hopefully fundamentally go into what we do.
Right. Yeah, and so let's talk about creativity, and even in just coming up with the 10 to 12 blocks of segments that we have in the last couple of days between the 3 of us. Where does creativity come from? So, we've already said, we're going to make it like Jimmy Fallon does the show. Is he Tonight Show? Which show does he do? I can never remember who does what show. But anyways.
Yeah, he took over one of the 2 famous ones.
One of the shows. Tonight Show, whatever. He did that. Yeah. And if you go on YouTube and you look up the show, it's always broken into little segments, right? And those little segments are super popular, like celebrity lip sync or whatever game he is playing with them at the time. And so I guess that's one of our sources of inspiration is that type of idea, like breaking it up into making it more like a talk show in some ways. What other sources of creativity do we have? Jessey, Erica, what do you think?
With Jessey, you gonna go? You want me to say something first?
I mean, I will always talk. I usually have to check myself too.
Erica, this is a time for you to do your.
This is a time for you to step up.
That's my thing again. Put everyone else first. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like to a degree, yes, ideas are inspiration, but the real secret I think is just opening yourself up to it. You can get your brain constantly spewing out and processing new kind of ideas and new thing all the time if you get into the rhythm of it. It is something you kind of have to practice at first. If you feel like, at least in my kind of the classes I've taken or different things I've done, I think one of the best things I ever did was a creative psychology course, which is really just like, where does creativity come from, right? The best thing going through that course was kind of opening my
It comes from here.
Yeah, exactly. But you can open your brain up to that line of thinking. Like you can get yourself constantly coming up with new ideas if you start practicing at it. And yes, it's not necessarily comfortable for everybody at first if your brain doesn't actually do that. Like it sounds strange, but I feel like people who think in pictures kind of have creative ideas that like spawn very, very quickly. But people who think in words come up with longer ideas that generate kind of stringing together. So it depends on which way of thinking you are too, right? Because you're not going to come up with the same ideas at the same frequency as someone who doesn't think like you. But you can open yourself up to more ideas as you practice doing that, if that makes sense.
Right. So what would all the neuroscientists say, Jessey, about creativity?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know why people think I'm an expert at all things.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Like all I can do is tell you.
I actually don't think that about you at all.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, so I don't know what the neuroscientists would say. I mean, I do know neuroscientists who would just stick you in a scanner and get you to think about stuff. I don't know what they would learn from that.
Your brain would go funny colors.
Exactly. Yeah, you can make a nice mosaic. I think for me, at least, creativity and inspiration and board game design sort of go hand in hand. I think Erica's right that the first thing towards like having more ideas and being more creative is letting yourself be open to things. You need to practice saying yes to yourself every time your brain, like you get a spark of an idea or a thought. You have to give yourself permission to chase it down. I know, at least for me, that was a hurdle to overcome in the early stages of becoming a game designer. Was accepting that just because you don't know at the moment when you first think of something whether or not it's worth pursuing, and you'll never know unless you pursue it for a little while. So let your ideas spiral out and work with them, chew on them. And if it turns out not to have been something you wanted to build or design or create, the process of chewing out the idea is practice in and of itself. And then the other thing specifically with respect to board game design, and I mean, I'm someone who has tons of ideas. Almost none of them get beyond the first playtest, but like it used to be the case. We get to every Thursday at our playtesting nights, I'd show up with at least 2 new games, at least 2 prototypes that had never existed before, and they never did again. But every week I was coming with at least 2 brand new things in addition to the stuff that was constantly being worked on.
And he still managed to finish his PhD.
In 5 years, took an extra year, and I think this is why. But the thing that changed things for me, that turned me into sort of a huge idea generating machine, was I was having a conversation with Eric Lang, or he was talking with somebody and I was just listening. And he'd mentioned that if you want to be a board game designer and you want to do this like professionally, not just casually, you need to be constantly designing. Everything you see in the world is an opportunity to design a game, and just try, right? And maybe, yeah, anyway. So once I heard that advice, I just started doing it. I'm just constantly trying to make games out of everything I see, and most of it's not useful.
Well,
hey.
no,
everything can be a game. That's the best way to look at the world. Right? Everything's a game. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Even just was it today or yesterday, Jesse, when we were talking about that new idea we had, and we said, oh, that's basically like our old idea,
Yeah.
just with better mechanics.
Yeah.
Right?
But things evolve and get better.
Right?
Exactly.
So really, Jess, that was the pivotal moment, was because that was less than a year ago.
Yeah.
Really? That was
I
pivotal
mean,
for you. I mean, I know it's pivotal for you, but I'm thinking like that was the moment.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. For
So
me,
kind of awesome.
yeah, it's great. And like what you're saying is definitely true in a lot of ways when it comes to things like co-design. So all three of us co-design heavily. Why? Because I don't know by myself if this is a good idea or not. And so I run it by Jay, I run it by Jesse, whoever I'm co-designing with, I run it by Niles. If it's good, they'll probably think it's good too, and that's what sticks and that's what we work on. From a psychology perspective, we all want that validation, right? We all want that reflection back to us so that the idea is good. And so I think that's not where creativity comes from, but where creativity can be validated and say, yeah, this has worth in doing, just to see if pulling on that thread is going to unravel something that's great and pull a curtain down that makes
I think it'll train your instincts too. Like that's the thing, is we actually have that thing. There's a reason we want to go down that path of creativity, right? But we don't have that instinct at first when you're first starting out to say, yes, this is a good idea. I should be spending my time on this. And that is a great thing about co-design, is that you get that awesome feedback loop that, to be honest, you could figure out with someone else in 10 minutes would have taken you like 3 months, because you've already both triggered, oh, wait a minute, that would happen. We shouldn't do that. Right. But it's interesting trying to go down that to see where your ideas are going to go. Yeah. But
so it's another interesting aspect to create creativity. Excuse me. Is that part of it we think comes from expertise, if we're looking at creativity as a psychological construct. So expertise being basically an expert in many things, many facets, or many aspects. No, that's not the word. On a subject. An expert on a subject really is just somebody who's really good at hierarchically categorizing stuff. That is mostly what expertise ends up looking like. Somebody who can quickly recall with automaticity an idea, a thought, a pattern. Those people are what we consider experts. But the cool thing about expertise is that once we've developed mastery in certain skills, in certain ways, in certain patterns, we then play with them. And the playing of it is what becomes creativity. And I tell this story to my students all the time. And when we're talking about expertise and creativity and psychology, that my son Eli is, he's a Pokemon master. He knows all about Pokemon. And at first, he was just interested in Pokemon, right? But now he's interested in, making his own Pokemon, writing stories about Pokemon. So being creative around an area that he's an expert in. Why? Because he feels confident enough to express that expertise in some way. And so you can see that even with designers, as they play more games, as they try new things, as they fail, they become more willing to risk if the feedback from the failure isn't stop and never do this again. If it's encouraged, like,
never say stuff like that.
Right? Like, hey, this is a good idea. I think this has some potential. Those types of words help people express their creativity and take that risk, because like Erica said, it is a risk to be creative. We don't know what's going to come out of this time we're spending, or this money we're spending, or our efforts. And so yes, there's a little bit based in expertise. So my point there is that, play more games, do more things, and like Jesse said,
design challenges.
Do design
challenges.
challenges.
You learn from it,
like,
right? Challenge yourself.
So I used to, when I first got started doing this, I used to do there was this monthly contest series on Board Game Geek that someone was running, where they would just put up a new theme every month, and it was like, design a game this month about ice. And every month I would make something and I would submit it to that contest. None of the games were any good that I made. None of them were worth printing or making, but all of them was a valuable learning experience where I pushed around some mechanics and I learned a few more things about how games and people interact. And that kind of like regular practice is really, really valuable. And it's like Sen said, it builds into that expertise, which inevitably helps promote your creativity because you've got more and more of these like partial game templates floating around in the back of your mind. And then you never know when those old ideas are going to come right back to the surface as the perfect solution to a design problem or the seed of a new idea that you're working with. So
I love when ideas click together. It's so much fun.
Yeah, like Lego. And the other thing that you mentioned in all of the ideas about doing contests, those are constraints, right? And we often talk about how constraints breed creativity. The idea of how can I make a game that fits in this Altoid tin?
Yeah,
It's kind of creative, right? You're basically flexing your creative muscles to solve this problem. When the brain has this kind of wide open territory, this sandbox to play, and by the way, this is why I don't like sandbox games. But when the brain has this big sandbox to work in, we often get caught in analysis paralysis. Literally, like
too much choice.
Don't know what to do. There's too much choice. But when somebody says, "Hey, I want you to make a game that only uses dice and is set in the futuristic world of whatever," then it's remarkably easier. For some odd reason, constraints help us to guide our creativity but allow us enough freedom to kind of grow and express our own self within that. So there's another aspect to how doing contests can really help you. The idea that Jessey said about, you have patterns, you have tools, you have templates that you're going to build up over time. Those are really heuristics, right? When you think about it, they're heuristics that you can then apply to your next project and your project after that, and your project after that. I know between Jessey and myself, just because we design a lot together, that what used to take us several days to prototype, we can have banged out, mostly because Jessey does all this scripting, in like minutes now. And we're a lot better at knowing each other as well in terms of as a creative partnership, understanding each other's strengths and limitations, where we come from a data perspective and from a balance perspective. I start at balance, Jessey starts at chaos, and we sometimes eventually meet in the middle, right? But all of that is really, really a good thing. I'm just reading Niall's post here. Niall says his first post was the Mint Tin Challenge. He made a bag builder using the Mint Tin as a bag. Then he made a speed matching game using 18 cards. There was an 18 card challenge. They're split in quadrants, and you raise to make a 3x3 grid where each side match colors or numbers or shapes, and the edges would wrap around. So there's that kind of interesting kind of visual, spatial aspect to it. So yeah, I mean, those are really strong ideas just from the challenge of, hey, make something in 18 cards or make something fit in a mint tin, right? It's great.
I think that yep, sorry, go ahead, Jessey.
Okay.
No, Erica goes.
Okay. I'll put a quick finger on that then, since Sarah's given up on pushing through. You're gonna have to push through more. With respect to challenges in BGG and related to creativity and training yourself to sort of be comfortable chasing your ideas, 24-hour design contests are great. Because when you constrain yourself to finish the game in 24 hours, you don't have time to pursue the second idea you come up with. You have to run with the first one, and you've got to make it work. So if you're really struggling with opening yourself up to being creative and feeling comfortable exploring your own ideas, challenge yourself to make something in 24 hours. Find a simple constraint like a game that uses dice and is about space, and then sit down, give yourself a 24-hour block, and stop working after 24 hours.
That's a great one. A lot of game jams are run like that. So if you can find a game jam, like a 24 or 48-hour game jam, a lot of this happen at colleges where there are video game design programs, but oftentimes they are analog to start, and then they don't care if you're not a programmer or not a sound designer or whatever. They just want a good game, and then somebody else will take that and code it for you and things like that. So get involved
and creative challenges like that. I was going to say creative challenges like that are 100% will unlock more and more and more ideas that'll keep coming forth, because that's where the once you have that stimulation going, once you have that, it really does generate more ideas. Like your brain will start almost going on autopilot and you'll be like, oh, that'd be a fun idea. Oh, I want to try that. And you get to the point where you have to decide actually what you want to pursue again, right? That whole, the choice option. But the ideas do start to flow, and it's good to kind of force yourself sometimes. But I think restraints really do, I think they give us that world to play in, right? And I think we need to know what world our game is set in before we can move forward on that. And that's probably a hurdle for a lot of people, like that stumbling block when you're first getting into something you're trying to design is, again, like what is this I'm in? Like, what does this world look like and how is it going to function?
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people end up trying to make a game in a world that they like already. Like, I'm going to make a game set in Star Wars, not because I expect it to be a Star Wars game ever, but because the world affords me hooks and settings and a constraint that I understand and know and love. So yeah, let's move on.
We're talking about new segments, so, and creativity, and so we do have a lot of different segments that are going to be design challenge based. So we thought maybe we give one a try.
Right, and so we're gonna call this one batting practice, right? Because we're expecting to come up with a pitch by the end of it all. And what do you think, Erica? Are we doing this as a team? Are we doing this one-off and somebody starts and everybody adds the next to the next thing to the next thing?
Love collaborative, because I would say knowing the way that you and Jessey kind of like, I already know your process a little bit, or I know just like how you guys like to talk back and forth, is that I think the more ideas bounce, the more they get connected together. Okay. So we'd probably do better to keep bouncing ideas.
Okay, and so are we going to have a method by which we know somebody wants to talk? So we're not talking over each other? What do you think?
We could say add, maybe. I don't know.
It'd probably be better for me to have a visual sign so I can click on you.
Oh, maybe someone puts their hand up.
Oh, right, because we're teachers. Okay, let's do that.
Well, I mean, eventually, I have a favorite podcast. One of the things they do, because they have a trivia challenge, is they have all these different sound things. So what we could eventually do, if you really wanted to, we could each have our own designated sound, and then you talk.
All right. It has to be recognizable.
No, it is.
We can get some soundboards, and it can get ridiculous.
Yeah. There's soundboards. There's barnyard sounds. There's all kinds of stuff.
All right, let's do something like that. Okay,
all right, so you want to explain this segment?
Sure. So this is batting practice, and eventually, when Erica finds it, we're going to use cards from Unpub, the card game, designed by J.R. Honeycutt and Doug Lewandowski, two of our good friends, and we're going to turn the words from the cards, and we've generated some, into a pitch for a game. That's what we're going to do. I know lots of other podcasts and stuff do this, but we're going to do it anyways because it's fun. And then after
this is how you generate ideas, people.
Yeah. We're going to talk to you about the other segments that we're going to do. But let's start with this one. Jessey, you've got the words, right?
Yeah, I've pulled up a random set of a theme, a mechanic, and I guess a second mechanic. I don't know. I just threw some stuff.
Okay, so what are they? Tell me.
All right, we've got dinosaurs, hidden rolls, and dice building.
Dinosaur, hidden rolls.
Dinosaur, hidden roll, dice building.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
I have an idea already. Can we have the hidden roll part of it, that one of us is a carnivore and we don't know who it is?
That's exactly where I was going. That's awesome. Excellent. Okay, so the hidden roll, dinosaurs, one of us is a carnivore, so a velociraptor or a T-Rex, identified on cards.
Can I add another one?
Yeah.
Can we do some sort of time track where by nighttime, if you don't figure who it is, they're going to eat everybody?
Nice. Yeah, so there's some pressure. I like that. How would the dice building work? This is where I'm lost.
See, I think that should have something to do with your actions. Like,
yeah, so you should all be trying to do something, and then there's a traitor, it sounds like, in the mix.
Mm-hmm. Right? Oh, they should be able to affect the dice somehow, but I'm wondering how.
Yeah, what are the dice? What are the dice about?
Well, we roll them, probably, or we place them in different faces.
They make noises, and
they do, but we're building them. We're taking them apart, and we're putting new faces on. So what do these new faces have on them? Do they have different dinosaurs? Do they have food sources? Location?
the dice, maybe the dice represents a combination of our herd. We've got some dice that represent the dinosaurs in the herd, and we've got some dice that represent where we are, so like the location. And so when you're building dice, you're actually just like changing the composition of the herd or where we are. So if we were like, oh, we're going to move the herd, then that means I'm going to take 2 of the tree pieces off of the location die and replace them with water, because now we're in a water place. And so it's like a central dice pool, and we roll it every round, and it's sort of like where we are and who we are and what we've got going on. But one of us wants to eat everybody.
Okay. How do we eat people? How are we eating people? And what's the motivation to eat people? I mean, other than the fact that I'm hungry.
It should be like, I think there should be something slightly more than, the carnivore wins if you don't discover them by midnight sort of thing. But the one hard problem with that secret identity sort of thing is that you don't want to have any moments where you're like, okay, everybody look away or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess the question is, how do they affect the dice without anyone knowing? Because as much as I'm not a fan of the theme, what at least I like that Secret Hitler does is that it gives those cards where you have that option of playing that bluff. Right. So nobody ever knows, because you're passing it more than once. It's really hard to know what was being passed. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
It allows for that manipulation basically openly.
Right.
So the question is, how do you manipulate dice openly?
Well, if it's co-op with a trader, right? Legitimately, that's kind of what this is a co-op with a trader. Maybe there's sort of a goal, and everybody gets to change a die somehow to meet the goal of the space that you're in. Like, oh, this place can't handle more than, I don't know, 12 life of beasts, of dinosaurs. And I keep thinking of The Land Before Time, where it was all different sorts of dinosaurs that were the main herd, right? Where it was, long necks and 3 horns and, duckbills, right?
Yeah. I have an idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what if it was actually dice and map based? So let's say that at the beginning of the game, the person who actually is the carnivore knows where the other of its, let's say, hunting party are within the valley.
Oh.
And so what happens is we're co-op, so we're all saying, hey, why don't we go here? Why don't we go here? Maybe it is almost like a Land Before Time thing where we're trying to get to this hidden valley or whatever it is. Like we're trying to get to the safe zone, right? But we don't know where we're going. So we're negotiating this on a blind map essentially as a group, but one of us actually does know where everything bad is. The thing is that one of us could take the active role and say, hey, let's go this way, and not realize we would be ambushed by like a bunch of raptors or something like that, right? So you could have those fun swings of, but I didn't know. And you're like, yeah, right, you knew this was going to happen, right? Or I think that could be fun, but I can't quite put the dice on properly.
Yeah, the dice building is the hard one right now. But I'm liking the rest of it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's think.
I would hate to rip off Dice Forge, but part of me is like, when you keep saying dice building, I'm literally thinking Dice Forge right now because of building the dice.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if somehow that would be an interesting way of like manipulating the dice as applying new pieces.
Well, I mean, if instead of like, if we wanted to make it more abstract, it could literally be that, going back to my previous idea of having the dice represent our locations and stuff. And so the Predator's goal, they're trying to push the dice probabilities so that there's the roll that happens that triggers the ambush.
Right. Or the roll that happens where no live things come up.
Right, exactly. Whereas the other players are trying to push the dice. Oh, this could be interesting. It could like have a Hanabi style system where each of us has some information about, or I guess this isn't Hanabi, but each of us has some information about where the Great Valley is, or the Secret Valley. And so we want the rolls to come up in a way that makes our hidden goal true. And if all of the herbivores' goals are met in the same turn, we win. But the carnivore trader has a different objective that would trigger their ambush. And so they just want to make it so that the dice roll results in the ambush happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. I mean, dice are a problem for that because you could roll and it could work just on the first roll.
So this is where we can use dice building, so this is where we can use dice building to actually fix that problem, where you can have that unsatisfying. Whoops, the game's over on the first turn. Initially, the dice might be mostly blank, and so it's not even possible for the goals to be achieved. And then what we do is through some negotiating system, we decide we're going to put this face on this dice. We might only have 3 dice that we're building, right?
Well, that's true too. Like I'm thinking like a handful of dice, but maybe we have less dice. That would
maybe it's 3, and maybe at the beginning of the game they have nothing on them,
or they only have 1 face or something,
or 1
like
face
that. Like
each.
Yeah, it's very scarce. We don't know if food is, so that's the only chance at food is those couple places we know.
Right. And then
it could be survival dice.
Well, I think that's kind of what we're talking about here, that it's survival based. But that then because I mean, if there was, oh look, that person put a raptor on the die, they're obviously the bad guy. There's no reason.
Yeah, no, I think that's what I'm saying. It's if the bad guys are hidden throughout the board, each of us, within a co-op, you're going to have people who can actually take leads and are going to lead you into situations where they're actually going to trigger these ambushes that or where they are. Like you might be trying to manipulate the group to going there. All right. I think that would be interesting, is if it was maybe almost like an elimination goal. Like you have to get a certain amount of the herd thinned out before a certain amount of time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, basically we're saying or it hits midnight and he eats everybody. So whatever you want to say.
Right. Well, if it was survival based, the sort of inevitable victory of the predator is that everybody else fails to eat because they've got plenty of food left.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it's
always there.
It's not midnight. It's food runs out. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't find
you become my food. Ha ha ha.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
But I definitely like the idea of dinosaurs in a hidden role. I think that's funny.
Yeah. Dice building's a bit difficult, but anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So
one, I don't know. Anyway, so that would be a segment idea, and maybe what we could do is we could say there's a time limit.
I know we didn't get dice building really in there in a satisfactory way, but we have a dinosaur hidden role concept. We need a title for this.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
So what's the game's title?
Do you guys like silly or do you like more serious?
I like puns, so
that's what I would say. I find that silly, right? I'm trying to think of a clever deceit word and then a dinosaur word.
Right?
A deceit dinosaur
word. Yeah. Oh my god, super cheesy. It's just Decetosaurus.
Decetosaurus.
That's terrible.
All right.
Just keep it going. That's the first terrible idea.
That's keep going. Okay.
So we got Decetosaurus. What?
Dino lies.
Dino lies. All right.
Dino lies. Dino lies.
I don't know.
What about the word like prehistoric? Is there something like
See, if it was my kids, they'd say they'd want to call it T-wrecked, like get wrecked, because they always say "get wrecked, son." That's what they say. Because they're
I'm gonna thesaurus the word like hidden or something, or like a secret or something like that.
Secret.
We're not doing very good at this.
Hidden lies.
Secret stories. Yeah, hidden.
It sounds like secret sauce.
No, if you're gonna make a pun on the hiddenness, it needs to work with carnivore or meat eater, because that's what our hidden role is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Eric is gonna smack me for this. Like hide the meat, but anyway.
I can't hear you. What did you say?
I said hide the meat.
Oh god.
But that's not
hide the meat eater.
Hide the meat eater.
Hide the meat eater.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. On that note, we're gonna move on. And obviously, we're not really practiced at this yet. But we're gonna move the segments along a lot quicker than this.
Yes.
It's just an idea.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is
about.
We'll set time limits, maybe like that 10 to 15 minute mark, or I think 10 minutes seems to be good for like a creative bout, and then we wrap up whatever we came up with by the end of that.
Right, and so somebody's probably going to have to moderate the segment, and the rest of us can participate. And I think that's cool.
Yeah. First lesson.
Is there possible to put a counter of some kind?
On
like,
here?
Is it possible to show a counter?
No, you know what? And this is another thing that I think we should talk about. Why not now? We don't have a huge live audience at the moment, but that's one of the questions we actually wanted to ask you guys. And maybe I'll put a poll up is, would you prefer a show that wasn't live? Is having a live show worth the effort to get everybody together at the exact same time? I mean, we're gonna have to get people together at the same time anyway, but always the same time, excuse me, on the
It's more
same night.
flexible.
Can we be more flexible? Yeah, exactly. With a pre-recorded show that has the ability for us to, I mean, like, I'm not video editing king, but the idea to be able to do a little video editing. Now, there's also another change that we have been discussing. I don't know if Erica, you were part of the actual discussion. I think I sent you the link to the software, but I'd found the software that allows would allow us to use Facebook Live and then Skype people into like a multi-screen Facebook Live. So instead of just me on the screen, or just Erica on the screen, or just Jessey on the screen, we'd have all 4 or 5 people on screen at the same time, broken up into little blocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that would be through Facebook Live, which would let us push out a message to subscribers, maybe a little bit better. I don't know, because a lot of people just kind of hang out on Facebook all the time. So I don't know, but
I think that makes more sense.
It also would allow us to still record. We'd still save a recorded version, but there's some really cool stuff in there that we can't do as easily on Google Hangouts. Like, we can just drag and drop like other video, and then we can have picture in picture, somebody talking over the video, and other things like that. So I want to look into that. Maybe not for this particular season, maybe after summer for season 6. That might be when we really say, okay, let's make a hard move. This, we might just want to say, okay, this season we're working on segments and figuring out what works for us in terms of that. So just another question to ask the audience is keeping this a live show worth it? I know, in my perspective, this is, I think, one of the only, video casts on game design that is live, and that's kind of interesting when we do have a bigger audience. But then sometimes when we don't, is it worth it? Or, I mean, we might be able to do best of both worlds and say, okay, let's have 3 out of every, or the first show of every month is live, and then any other show that month is pre-recorded or something like that, right? So
I think that would be a good compromise.
yeah. So we might have those, once the first show of every month is this time at this, and they're always aired at the same time, or they also go online at the same time, like 10 o'clock Wednesday night or whatever. There's a schedule, right? And that would help us keep to the schedule. I think, Erica, you were saying that would help us not miss when, half of us get sick at the same time.
Or technical difficulties,
Yeah.
or like the guests can't get their technology working. Like, and then the nice thing is you don't, and again, we talk a lot about things psychologically, is when you're live, you want to fill time almost.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not necessarily filling time, but you do not want dead air. There's that subconscious need to kind of keep going. Whereas if it's pre-recorded, the good thing is that someone can take a pause, think about something, we cut that out. Mm-hmm. Audience never knows about it, but it actually looks really good, and that person had that time to consider and think about what they wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from a guest perspective, I think that's nice and accommodating for a lot of people who, just in case maybe you're not good on the spot.
Right.
Some people are fantastic, right? But some people aren't.
Hey, here is speaking of live feed. Here's Sir Bob's contribution to the name for the dinosaur game: Stealth Steak Dinner.
What was it?
Stealth Steak Dinner. I like the stealth
steak
part.
Dinner. That's fun. I like stealth.
Stealthosaurus Rex.
Steakosaurus.
Steakosaurus Rex. Right.
Well, what could also be fun is that we try to encourage maybe more of a community around the things we're saying too. So for example, yes, maybe if we move to a pre-recorded, we wouldn't get the people talking on a direct feed through YouTube, but at the same time, maybe more people would actually send us questions in advance, especially for like, hey, we're doing this episode, or this is this month's, or
topic, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right?
Yeah, and they can target us back even with the segment names. Like, hey, here's an idea for your next, as we said, batting practice, or your next this and that. And it would be nice to have that interaction going on, not just when the show is going.
Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to see too. So I'm kind of leaning right now in my head, anyways, towards saying, okay, we're going to do some more pre-recorded. But I think stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I am like, part of me is, the killing the darling thing about this live thing that is fun too, right? So
We can still do some live, like there's nothing
yeah.
wrong with that. But then the nice thing is when we go places, we know that it doesn't have to be live on location. We can actually get a whole bunch of videos put together or snippets put together and do that mashup, right?
Yeah, because I think, Jessey, weren't you saying that some of your favorite episodes ever were our non-live ones?
I don't know. I mean, my
Like,
favorite episode ever was live, but I mean, I thought that it was unique, interesting content, at least, that you guys didn't do last year. But a couple years ago, when you were doing the conference tours,
right,
convention
that's what
tours,
I mean. Yeah, that
yeah,
stuff.
and you had those little interviews with other designers. I mean, those are really nice to listen to and
Yeah.
watch.
And that was extra content. That
Mhm.
didn't replace
Yeah,
the weekly stuff. That was just
no,
added on top.
no,
But we could do that as our weekly stuff as well. I mean, we could have those pre-recorded
Yeah.
segments. And that's
We
the
are
nice thing about
talking.
that. Yeah.
We are talking about doing more stuff at cons, right? I think last year there
again.
wasn't a lot, but I mean, that's the best thing. We're all going to be places where some pretty awesome people, so let's make them say some stuff, right?
Right.
Right.
And that's especially, I think, a goal of ours as well is to take it to the streets a little bit, but maybe not necessarily be live because that does bring in a whole host of technical issues.
Yeah.
It's a little easier for podcasters versus video casting like we do. So with podcasting, you can, edit it down later and you don't have to have a video feed. So, maybe we'll do a live recording as opposed to a
Yeah.
fully live stream. I don't
Yep.
know. We're also thinking about other technology. So that one from Ecom that I was talking about, maybe Twitch will look into a
Mhm.
bunch of different things. So, anyways,
Yep.
there's some changes. Um, so back to creativity. How did that exercise make you feel? The
See, I
dinosaur.
like doing stuff like that. I have a
Yeah.
feeling some people will be put on the spot, but you got to get over that, that anxiety, right? You kind of have to push through it or let it push you, sort of thing. And I think even knowing it's like, yes, I spewed out probably the worst name ever, but it doesn't matter because you just got to get someone has to say the first thing. It just doesn't matter what it is.
Mhm.
It's funny, and all of us being teachers, one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you guys, not you personally, the two of you, but if you're out there and you're a teacher, take an improv class if you aren't already that kind of person that can get in front of an audience and sort of roll with it, uh,
Mhm.
because that's what teaching is kind of all about. Your
Oh, it
students are
is.
gonna mess you up serious. They're gonna put little like monkey wrenches in every gear that you possibly have, and if you don't know how to roll with it, it's tough. And the same thing with game design. I think that there's a lot of improv, and especially the idea of yes and not blocking is really great when we have cooperative game design or co-design. So if you saw us just do that in terms of creativity, that none of us ever said no, 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 Jessey, that dice building idea is stupid, right? Did,
I don't
did I?
care. I'm making it anyway.
I didn't say that, did I, Jess?
No.
It's
No.
my identity dinosaur game, damn it.
Yeah. But the thing is that we
Don't
just said,
like it
yeah, that's
now.
great. And you could do this with it. And that kind of technique is actually from like very
Improv.
strict improv. And also
Yes.
very good for being a game master if you're a GM or a DM. Let things happen and then throw
Yeah.
problems their
Well,
way, right?
I'll also throw out a little tip for someone who's maybe constantly doesn't realize it, but always goes down to shooting down or going down to the negative. So there is a really fun creative process. I used to do it much more when I used to be in advertising, and it was the idea of the 6 colored hats. And each one represents basically a focus that you're going to be going on. But the first thing you do is you basically do the black hat. You throw out everything possibly negative you can do. And from then on, once you pass that hat, you never can say a negative thing after that. You're not allowed to say no or anything bad. And then you go on to each next step. So one will be about like, what's all the positive feelings about this? What's all of the, and we keep going down that, like the different types of stimulus. But the
That's
best
cool.
part is purge yourself of negativity. And then you are now restrained. You're not allowed to say no again.
Right. So more again, constraints
Hmm.
can help us, right?
Not
That's
sure
great.
how I feel about that.
Why?
Oh, I just felt like being negative in response to the advice to get the negativity out first.
But you like wearing
No,
hats.
I just said it.
I don't
I
wear
just said
hats.
if it happens to be
Yeah.
somebody, like if you feel that
No,
you
I know.
realize you have that habit of doing it, it was just something that I've seen work to say you're not allowed to do it anymore, right?
I like that. I like
This
that.
is another case of me failing to be funny.
No,
okay,
and the hats reference was to Monster Hunters, Jesse. Come on.
Oh, right. Yeah, everything's just going over my head. It's because I'm not wearing a hat that can catch things.
It's just this whole creativity philosophy. I think it's called like the six thinking hats or something like that. It's just, it's something in a, yeah. Anyway,
No, I like it. I think
it's
No, I
a
think
nice way of
that's
focusing your creativity. So
excellent.
yeah.
Let's take a look at
Should we try one more of our segments?
Yeah, exactly. Which one are we gonna do?
What did we do? The board game crush one.
Sure.
all right.
So in Board Game Crush,
Do you want to try that one?
yeah, we pick a board game we love and discuss why we love it from a design perspective. All right, great. Let's do that. Jess, do you want to go first, sir?
Okay, sure. So the first thing that jumped into my mind is this. Actually, hold on one second, because I'm going to mention it. Nobody's going to know what the game is. So Erica, you go, and I'm going to go get the game.
He's gonna get the game. Okay, so I was looking at my shelf and I've realized I have a huge crush on Mysterium, and I realized why. I realize it's because it does a few things that I absolutely love all at once. I'm not going to say it's like my favorite game ever, but there's elements of it that I was like, oh my God, I so wish I had a game like that. So for me, what I love is it's an updated Clue. I love that someone literally took something that kind of already existed and just made a really awesome version of it. Right? I'm not saying it is Clue, but it has a lot of that familiarity. But I actually like that it's familiar. I like that foundation, like that it has that foundation there. But then what I love is that it takes that idea of like just the beauty of the cards, and like that's how you discover through communication. Like I just love that communication picture idea, and trying to translate what someone's trying to tell you through this. And I'm like, oh, I love that idea. And so
and
I would say
have you told Mysterium lately that you love it?
I kiss it every day, you know. No, I realize I really, really enjoy a lot of what goes on in that game from a design perspective. As I said, it's not even necessarily my favorite thing to play, but I'm like, as from a design point of view, I'm like, I think this is gorgeous.
Yeah. Have you ever played it the way that you've
The
never
right
played
way?
it with me? Yeah, the right way. It might not be the right way, but it's the way that we play it.
It's not the right way.
Where the ghosts, where you can't show the card to anybody else that you got. You have to describe it as if you were really getting a dream. I can't show you my dream, Erica, but I can describe it to you. That in my dream there were balloons and a bicycle and a blue sea. And what do you think that means, Erica? You ever played it that way?
No, I mean, I like that. I think one of the things I did make sure that I do when I play is a lot of people are terrible in the ghost role of not giving things away. So I think I actually got this one from Peter, where it was knocking as the ghost for like almost like 1 for yes, 2 for no sort of thing. So there's no communication.
Peter Hayward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I like that was a good way of kind of stopping people, almost like those people who are terrible at playing games where you're like, no, you're not supposed to be talking right now, or you're not supposed to be saying anything. Like they suck at charades, and then they're the ghost, you know? So I like things that do that. Yeah. But anyway, yes, I think it's beautiful. That's fine.
Jesse, do you need some more time?
Nope, I got it.
Okay, great.
Cool. So the game that jumped to my head is actually Seven Swords.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, which is a 2-player game that basically just follows the sort of classic tale of Seven Samurai, in which you've got 7 powerful dudes that are defending a village from bandits attacking. And one of my favorite thing about this game is that for all of the games out there, and there's at least a couple that sort of try to replicate this story in the play, this one does an amazing job of actually capturing the narrative of that story, because what happens in that story, to spoil it, is that the heroes die. They all die over the course of the defense, and they all have these sort of heroic stands, and then they die and they're overrun and that position is lost, and it has this like really sort of satisfying arc that involves loss at the same time as you're making progress. And there's a mechanic in this game that makes it happen. So you start with the player that's playing as the samurai. You get your 7 characters. You're defending the village. The bandit leader's attacking, and you've got this turn track in the bottom of the board here. And as you're playing, if the bandit leader hasn't taken out one of your samurai by the start of the 6th turn, one of your samurai dies.
Yeah,
and
no matter what, right?
No matter what, but they kill a bunch of bandits when they do. But if you've already lost one at that point, it doesn't trigger the automatic sacrifice. So if you're successfully defending against the bandits, you lose a guy and you get an edge. If the bandits are kicking the crap out of you, you don't lose an extra guy. But what this does is you lose a guy there, and there. It ensures that over the course of the game, your numbers are dwindling, and it does such a great job of keeping the game tense, but also capturing that like narrative element of this specific story through the mechanisms. And I love it. I love it. So
almost sounds like it could be a 300 overlay at some point, and the same sort of idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's basically like Seven Samurai, the story, right?
Yeah.
Was it
exactly?
Yeah, exactly. It's a little Kurosawa.
Well, that's exactly it.
Thing. Right. And that's great. I think narrative arc stuff is wonderful, and it's deserving of a crush when a game can tell a story and still be mechanically satisfying and constrain you, right?
Or,
and force you
or
down a
tells
certain
the
path.
story through the mechanics, right?
Yes.
It doesn't hand you this, like this game doesn't hand you Kurosawa's story as text. You play the game and you experience that story, and it hits the narrative beats because they're encoded in the mechanics in a satisfying way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. I like that a lot. Robin Laws would be happy with you. That's great.
All right, Sen, what's yours,
Sen?
Mine. And as you were saying it, Jessey, all those times when your samurai die is just like when you push over the Jenga tower, right? And I was going to talk about Dread, just because I've been playing it a lot lately. Dread, for those of you who don't know, is an indie RPG in which you have a Jenga tower, and the Jenga tower replaces all the dice rolls. And basically, the game master will determine for the players how many pulls they must make if they decide to do an action based on your character's proclivities and skills and the situation and the enemy and all that kind of stuff. They may demand that you make pulls. They may say, if you want to do that, you can make this pull, but you don't have to make that pull. And so there's a lot of tension just in the pulling. But that is not actually what I wanted to talk about. What I want to talk about, this is a slap bracelet, by the way. What I wanted to talk about is actually the character generation. The character generation in Dread. I think it was the very first time I've ever seen question-based character generation. And I fell in love. Like, I literally fell in love with this and thought, this is amazing. This is like the best thing ever. Why? Because as a teacher, I'm very, very, very fond of inquiry-based learning. And for those of you who don't know what inquiry-based learning is, a lot of it is basically just you can boil it down to this. If you ask a question before you start studying or learning something, your brain will magically want to find out the answer for it. Right? So that's inquiry-based learning in a very fine nutshell. There's a lot more to it, obviously. It's a whole school of thought. However, if you boil it down, that's kind of what it works at. And the thing about Dread, with the questions that you're asked, so a good Dread question would say something like, which character in your party do you not like? And what did they do to you in the past that makes you dislike them this much? Right? That's a really interesting Dread question. And you don't know who's playing who, but you might know their archetypes. So you might say there's a medic, there's a soldier, there's a pilot, there's the science officer. Let's say we're playing on a spaceship. And you might say in your answer something like, I dislike the science officer because they were put up for what's their promotion in my place, even though I'm a much better officer than they are. Right. And then throughout the game, for some reason, your brain starts thinking, how do I get this into the story? This is a really interesting part of my character. How do I make this part of the story? And while the aliens are attacking, if that guy fails, I can then rub it in his face. This is just like in the exam when I ace that exam, but you were given the promotion. You should never been given the promotion, right? So it builds those relationships between the characters in a really interesting way that just kind of pop out of nowhere.
Those are really good triggers, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Eric and I are role playing right now in something that's been going on forever. Why? Because we never can get together. Maybe we can do it soon, though. I know Jonathan is thinking about it more. Is Jonathan Lavalley's game called We Used to Be
We
Friends.
Used to Be Friends, yeah.
Which is based kind of loosely around one of my favorite shows ever, Veronica Mars, and that idea of, you know, teen sleuths. And together with another player, Erica and I made this wicked city. It's really cool, right? Like Greenleaf
I like it.
is a really neat place.
It's very tropey, but it's perfect for that fact.
Right? And that's the reason why I think it's cool, is because the tropes.
Tropey, but it's yours.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it's expected. It's awesome for drama.
Yeah. And the idea, though, is that because we created it together, we co-created that world. We asked questions of each other, like, who is this, and why are they doing this thing, and what is the biggest problem in this area? We now know that, you know, there's a teacher that's running a drug trade within the high school, and all these cool things that even without playing, we haven't actually played the game yet. We've just made the city, but I still remember all that stuff because we asked questions. And so Dread was the first game that ever did that for me, and has stuck with me forever in that regard, that asking questions is an amazing way of generating interest in the game and story in your game. That's it. That's
Awesome.
my crush. Oh, before we do that, I want to read the crushes of some of our audience. So Sir Bob is saying Seven Wonders is his crush because he likes the simple drafting. Yeah, the simple drafting.
I think it's beautifully simple.
And the small barrier to entry, and that's true. Like, it's really an elegant game, right?
Yep.
And then Niles is saying he loves Concordia. Have you guys played Concordia?
I have not.
I have not.
What? It's a really good game. You can try it. So Concordia, he loves it because the game is just so quick to play and teach. But every time he finishes the game, it's so satisfying. He says that he's kind of tired of the current design trend to add more unique cards and actions and gaining strategies and gameplay from that. That more minimal designs where you get a lot of great gameplay under a small rule set seems to be satisfying him more right now.
Just a tiny recommendation given that game that I had the opportunity to play the other day, mostly because I've had the opportunity to hang out with Eduardo Baraf, who does Pencil First Games and League of Game Makers. Anyway, he gave us a copy of Herbaceous, which was a game they published last year, I think it was. The game is
Beth's art.
Yeah, with Beth's art. It's a gorgeous looking game about potting herbs. And the rules of the game fit on less than a single side of a card, and it is really interesting. So if Niles is into games that are very minimalistic but surprisingly deep, I think that one is is a good example of something that will surprise you.
Mm-hmm. I really do enjoy that. And it's funny, I play a lot of games, obviously, but I play a lot of old games because I have this whole shelf of games I haven't played in a long time. And every now and then we pick one of those, and they're like really old Reiner Knizia games and whatever, Kramer games, like really like the first wave of German games to come over, or not even come over. I imported them. But the point is that today, those wouldn't be games. Those would just be single mechanics within a game. But when you play them, it's actually refreshing to not have a 12-page rule book, to still play a game and enjoy it. And so that's one of the things that we're doing.
I was gonna say a good parallel to that's probably video games, right? Like you look at like just how much more is expected, but then there's a reason people still love the classics.
Right. Like my wife won't play any game where you're required to push more than 1 or 2 buttons. Just because she doesn't.
D-pads are fun.
Yeah, but she's like loves Frogger and Pac-Man and all the classics because they're just simpler.
We just picked up Overcooked on a sale last week.
Oh, Steam sale?
A PlayStation sale, because we put it on PlayStation 4. You only use 3 buttons in the game, joystick and A and B, basically. And Helena and I have been playing it nonstop. This is just so fun, and it's so simple, but it focuses on cooperation and everything, and there isn't a bunch of other mechanics to distract you from what's really fun about it. So there's something about minimalism.
Yeah. I think what you just said there, Jesse, is really true about, when we say find the fun, if you then go and cover it all up, really, are you doing yourself a favor as a game designer?
Yeah, it's just you're putting work into a game.
Yeah.
It's the reason, like, you don't want to feel like you're just grinding things out.
Right.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I actually really like about Cora, just to bring it back to something we've designed, Jessey and I designed that that is elemental. Ha ha ha, pun intended.
Ha ha ha.
At like it is really quite stripped down. Um but the depth of play, I feel, and I hope everybody else feels when they play it, is pretty cool with the minimal amounts of stuff going on. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a lot of rules. There are a lot of rules. Don't get me wrong, but it's not this sort of thing where there's a mechanic for everything, because it's really not. It's really the same set of mechanics that just apply differently based on which vendor you're using, which cards they have. And I think that to me is kind of a throwback to some of the more elegant games of yore. Even Azul, right? Have you guys played Azul yet?
I
haven't
haven't had
got
the
a
chance.
Yeah, even games like that, like they're people are liking it. I think because it is simpler. It's not
Yeah,
like
well, I think that's why people went crazy for Patchwork too, right? Is that it's a couple of straightforward mechanics put together. Anybody can play, but it's as deep as you want to make it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think Patchwork is a brilliant design. If you have two people and you haven't played Patchwork, go get it. It's a wonderful game. And so that really is what Board Game Crush is all about. I think is talking about games we love, but from the design perspective, not from the playing perspective. I think Erica did a really good job of picking one that she likes to play, but it's really the design of it that something about that really made you feel that's
Yeah,
a
I want to
really
come
good
up with
design.
that.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing, right? So some games I
Right.
love playing, but it's like, yeah, I don't care to ever design that. And then some of them are like,
It wouldn't be
I
me.
didn't think of
Yeah.
that, right? Yeah, it would be really cool to design that game.
Mhm.
Um, David Toy is online. How are
Hey.
you doing, David? That's
Hi,
awesome.
David.
David, if you guys don't know out there in Meeple Syrup Land, is the kind and generous man. He is a man, kind of generous man who does all the audio transfers over to iTunes. So he told me today that he's going to get back on doing things, and it's really our fault in a lot of ways because we have such a sporadic schedule that he's going to get that rolling again. So look out for that if you are one of our podcast listeners. I guess listen out for that would be more appropriate.
Actually, I was gonna say I'm curious how long a podcast the listeners want, because the interesting thing is that especially if you go pre-recorded, is maybe they don't mind us talking for longer, but they'd like it split into two, so maybe it's in two half an hours or two
Oh,
45s or
that's a
something
good
like
idea.
that.
That's an interesting thought too, right? Um, So like we started a poll today. Oh, interesting. We'll lead back to the poll. So we started a poll today, and we can do another poll for that one, Erica, is what I was getting at, in terms of time and digestible portions, right?
Mm.
Most of the podcasts I listen to are like 30 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah, 30 to 40 seems to be that comfortable
Yeah, because it's a car
sort of.
drive, right, or a bus trip.
Mhm.
And to me, that's perfect. I don't mind, I don't mind listening to Ludology. Ludology is usually about an hour. And I don't mind listening to that, on my trip there, and the second half on my trip home. I'm okay with that. But yeah, I mean, if we go down to little half-hour bits, then we're gonna have to really tighten stuff up. But in post, we can do that. When we're live, you're right; it's a lot harder to chop stuff up. Um, David said it's his laziness that. No, David, you're not lazy. It's our weird scheduling. Oh, back to the idea of the poll. So the poll that I put up today was for people to let us know if they'd be interested in a weekly mail out from Meeple Syrup. And it all kind of stemmed from me just doing this hashtag board game design pro tip um, on my Facebook page and Twitter for the last couple of days. And it wasn't something I intended to make a daily thing, but it's like, oh, people are actually reading these and liking them, so maybe I should keep on doing that. And then I pitched an idea to Jessey and Jay. Hey, we can make a one a day calendar where it's rip it off and it's the next Far Side comic, but instead of Far Side comic, it'd be a board game pro tip. And Jay's answer was like, yeah, but nobody will buy it. And so he's probably right that nobody would buy it, but I wanted to
It's
see
like
how
a
many
con
people.
giveaway.
Yeah, I wanted to see how many people would actually want to read it. And so far, we've gotten a pretty good response rate. Like only one person said they wouldn't care for that. And so Jessey and I were talking about it today. So Jess, why don't you fill the audience in on what we might do with that?
Yeah. So my response, that was Jay's response. My response was, "Hey, I was actually just thinking about maybe writing a book using these." So complete opposite side of things. And so spinning off that, we thought that a more manageable thing than either a calendar or a book would be something like a weekly inbox mail out where you sign up for the mailing list, and every Tuesday you would get an email from Meeple Syrup, and in that email will be a pro tip, a little discussion about the pro tip, and a picture that may or may not be related to the pro tip.
I think
Kind of thing.
May. I think May is more
May?
important.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to commit the picture to what it was going to be. You know, I'd let the
It's
picture
always
be.
going to be a puppy, people. It's a puppy.
Right. It's always a puppy. It's like puppies and pro tips. That's the mailing list.
Can it be
That's the
hedgehogs? Because I
millions.
really like hedgehogs.
Hedgehogs and hints. There you go.
Oh yeah, yeah.
hedgehogs and hints. There we
You
go.
gotta have
You know what?
alliteration, right? If it's not a pun, it's gonna be alliteration.
Sorry, that
That's
sounds
right.
like it should be from like a Harry Potter world, though.
And don't we
Right.
all wish we were wizards?
You're
Yeah.
not?
So that's the idea. I'm not going to deal with that. That's the idea. We're thinking about doing this mailing list with pro tips. Just sort of following up on the same kind of thing Sen does, but with a little bit more of discussion in it, not just the quippy tip, but a little bit of a breakdown or a examination of what that tip actually means.
And so it might start with a quippy tip, because they're kind of memorable and they're like, oh yeah, that fits as a heuristic in my brain. Then we would then blow it up a little bit more, like examine it a little bit more, and we would have Erica, myself, and Jessey do this as a Meeple Syrup thing. I just totally voluntold that Erica's going to do this. Hope you're okay with that. But then also we'd mine some of
that's
our.
a Canadian expression.
Yeah. Then we'd mine from our past guests and our past hosts, like Dylan and Daryl and John and Tyler and everybody else, Stephanie and Tiffany, asking them, about their pro tips, and from all of the guests that we've ever had, which number in like the hundreds now. So we probably have enough to do one a day for a long time, but we're not going to do one a day. We'll probably do one a week, because otherwise we'll, probably die.
We make games, people, and have lives. So
yeah, so it would probably be like, a 500 word, a couple paragraphs of stuff, and a very big picture to make up a lot of space. But it'd be that kind of thing that I think would maybe just spurn people on to kind of get their creative juices flowing, or to re-examine a game that maybe is sitting on a shelf somewhere not working, to say, oh, that's.
Oh no, is he frozen?
Pardon me?
Oh, he's back. He's back.
Oh, he's back.
Who?
Cool.
Me? Was I frozen?
Yeah, you froze.
I think so. I held my breath while you were frozen, though, so I might have been effectively frozen.
I heard you. Hold your breath. So, before we go, I just kind of wanted to. Oh, we're like way past time. Look at that.
Way past time.
Yeah.
Way past time. Well, we've got a little time to discuss stuff. So, before we go to the tradition, I wanted just to go over the segments, just so people will hear what the possible segments are. Is that a good idea, you think?
Do we want to just surprise them?
Yeah, I think we could give them tryouts.
Okay, we'll just surprise them, and we'll give them names, and we'll make sure, and then we'll, like, at the end of the month or something, we'll have like a vote or something.
Which segment was your favorite?
Yeah, which segment was your favorite? Yeah. Which was your least favorite? Yeah. And we'll eliminate the least favorites and keep the favorites.
There you go.
Or something like that, or filter them in at a higher rate.
We'll promise to do segment tryouts over the remainder of the month.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I see that in our show notes, Jessey has just written something. So we're moving on to that. It's our tradition to wrap up the show with everybody giving a piece of advice to designers for the new year. And Jessey has another thing written there. Jessey, what is that about?
That's my piece of advice.
All right.
I am more articulate when I have the chance to write down what I'm about to say before I say it. And so I got ahead of the game. So
yes, that is proactive. All right, Jessey, then therefore you're going first, buddy.
Perfect. That's fine. So, in lieu of a piece of advice, I'm going to give a challenge slash strategy. Given that I've been
So
thinking
that's a strategy
a
or
strallenge. I've
or
got a strallenge for all of you
a
designers out there.
challengey, a
A
Challenge.
challengey,
challengey.
a
I have a
challengey.
challengey. Yeah.
Challenge.
So there's been a growing trend of creating so-called story games or narrative games. This idea that we're making games where the big thing that they're bringing to the table is some kind of story or narrative experience. And so, if you're working on something that you describe as a story game or a narrative game, or you think the game that you're working on has a really strong narrative and that's part of its hook, here's my challenge. For your next 3 playtests, I want you to remove all flavor text from all of your components. And I don't want you to tell players about the flavor text or the world or the characters. Just have the game. In doing so, you'll be able to figure out how much of your story or narrative is based on you telling the players what the story is, and how much of it is a product of the experience of actually playing your game.
That's a
So,
really cool one. I like that. That's very Dark Souls
That's a
of
good
you, my friend.
challenge.
yeah,
Very
no
Dark Souls.
flavor text. Your
Yeah.
narrative
No
game
flavor.
should tell a story without flavor text.
Yes. The game should tell the story. Good.
Yes.
Erica,
Mm-hmm.
what's your advice?
I had 2 roll through my brain, so I'm not sure which one the better one is right now.
Why not
I let one
both?
lead into the
Yoo-hoo!
why not both? So the first one I thought of is just make it. Like, we keep talking about creativity this episode, but the main thing is just pick an idea and see what it becomes. Even if you put the bits out in front of you, when you start actually touching them, you're like, this is the game that falls out. I think too many people keep things in their head and keep it rattling around, and you can make so much more progress when it's physically in front of you. So I would say that's a big one, is, anyone who's maybe stuck at that stage, just make it. You can throw it away later, but at least you got it out of you, right? So I think the other big one is, don't just make one game at a time. I think the more and more I keep watching people, as I go to like different conventions and things like that, is designers who are committed to one design. Unfortunately, I think they put so much of themselves in that one design that they're not necessarily as open, I've noticed, to feedback. Things, the good part is you always have something else to focus on, always have something else to work on. And maybe if you hit a roadblock with one, you've got something else to keep going with, so you never kind of stagnate, which is great for creativity. But the nice thing is too, it's good for kind of the ego too, is that you've got other things on the go, other than just one thing. If it's not working out, or that it's like, okay, well, this will work for that will work for this, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my piece of advice is kind of stemming off of all of these, is you are a designer. Don't tell yourself you're not. Don't let anybody else tell you're not a designer. You might not be published, but that's okay. You're still designing something, therefore you're a game designer. And
Yeah.
that's something you have to believe in and of yourself, to have the confidence to go to a convention, to have the confidence to go to a publisher speed dating event. You're good enough right now. Just by designing a game, if somebody can play the game from your rules, you've designed something and you're good. Um, I want people to, stop talking about real gamers, just like I want to stop people from talking about, a an actual game designer. It's okay to delineate between
What does that
published and
mean?
unpublished. Exactly, right? What does that mean? But published and unpublished, that's, we've got a delineation there. But other than that, you're a designer if you're designing something. And so I want you to get into that mode in your head so that you can have the confidence to go show your work to other people, because that's really where the magic happens. Having stuff up here and on your table, or even on your table in front of your pool of friends, is wonderful. It is. It's great. If you want to show it to other people, you've got to get it in your head that it's good enough, right? And good enough doesn't mean that it's going to get published. Good enough means that people can play it. That means they can give you feedback to make it better, right? To make it better than it is today. That's all we really hope for as designers, is that what I show you today will become better because you played it. That's about it. So that's my advice to you, is get that out of your head. Get the idea that you're not good enough out of your head. You are good enough. You are making something that is worthwhile. and somebody's going to like it. So get them to play it, because that is step one to going from being an unpublished designer to being a published designer. Really, it is. Okay, so we'll see you guys all next week. We won't make any super drastic changes to our delivery yet. We're going to talk about that over the next couple of weeks. And we will come back with some more segments to surprise you with. Hopefully, we'll have things a little tighter by then, and we'll get our guests all sorted out within the next couple of weeks as well. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
So if you have any questions or concerns, you can reach us on Facebook or on Twitter, Meeple Syrup. And other than that, say goodnight, everyone.
Good night.
Say good night.
Good night. See y'all later.